Welcome to Revelation Unraveled. I'm your host, William Tapley, also known as the third eagle of the apocalypse and the co-prophet of these end times. I'm sure you've heard by now about Ruth Bader Ginsburg falling and cracking 3 of her ribs. I've had that happen myself, and it's very painful. I believe she is still in the hospital. Although it's not serious, it is, I believe, a warning from Almighty God. Not just to Ruth Bader Ginsburg that she should retire and let Donald Trump replace her with a pro-life justice to the Supreme Court. It is a warning specifically to those of us here in the United States. God was not pleased with the election results. The House of Representatives vote was very discouraging because it showed that many, perhaps a majority of Americans, have rejected the leader that he has given us, and that is Donald Trump. His policies are making America great again, just as he says. But too many people reject the leadership which God tells about in Isaiah 45, where he sends us a person like King Cyrus. King Cyrus is a hero, and God says that he is directing Donald Trump's right hand. Those 3 ribs that Ruth Bader Ginsburg cracked refers to Daniel chapter number 7, where the bear has 3 ribs in its mouth. And I want to read to you about these 3 beasts which come up out of the sea, because they represent not only the United States, but also Russia and Great Britain. These are the 3 beasts which destroy each other in World War III. And God is telling us that we cannot accept the policies of the Democrats. We must get behind our president. This election is telling people like Putin and China that Donald Trump is weakened, and that is the truth. So let me read these 3 verses from Daniel number 7, because God is reminding us about this prophecy. Jesus told us that the prophet of the end times in the Old Testament is Daniel. Chapter 7, verse number 4. The first was like a lioness. By the way, some Bibles say lion. That's incorrect. It's lioness. That refers to Great Britain. And had the wings of an eagle. I beheld till her wings were plucked off. The 2 wings represent her colonies, specifically the United States. And she was lifted up from the earth, and she stood upon her feet as a man, and the heart of a man was given to her. This is in contrast to her being female. All of these beasts in Daniel 7 represent both a king and a kingdom. In this case, it represents Margaret Thatcher. She was the female personification of the lioness. And verse number 5. And behold, another beast like a bear stood upon its side, and there were 3 ribs in its mouth. This is what those 3 cracked ribs of Ruth Bader Ginsburg are referring to. And in the teeth thereof, the 3 ribs are in the mouth and in the teeth. And thus they said to it, Arise, devour much flesh. This bear represents Russia. It is being told by Almighty God to devour much flesh. And the 3 ribs represent the lioness, which is England or Britain, and it represents the leopard, which we'll see in a minute, but it also represents the bear itself. In other words, Russia will destroy 3 countries, including Russia, in World War III. And verse number 6. And after this I beheld, and lo, another like a leopard, and it had upon it 4 wings as of a fowl, and the beast had 4 heads, and power was given to it. Now the personification of this beast is Barack Obama. He had 4 heads and 4 wings because he was the 44th president. He was given dominion and power because he was the president of the United States. Don't listen to the false prophets, by the way, who try to tell you that the leopard is Germany. All 4 characteristics of this leopard represent both the king and the kingdom. In other words, Barack Obama, and the United States. Now, all three personifications of these beasts have come and gone. In other words, Margaret Thatcher, Dmitry Medvedev, and Barack Obama. All we are waiting for now is the fourth and final beast. The expression of World War III in Daniel 11 and in Jeremiah 50, we have survived those because of the election of Donald Trump. But there are three other expressions of World War III. One of them is found here. Another is in Daniel 8, where the ram takes on the goat. And the goat has a single horn, representing Russia. The ram has two horns, symbolizing Britain and America. Again, the goat destroys the two horns on the ram. In other words, Russia destroys Britain and America in World War III, but also destroys itself. That's why there are three ribs in the mouth of the bear. And just to show you that I am right about this, I want to show you a prophecy that I gave back in January, and that was when the train carrying the Republicans crashed. And I told you what that was about. This train crash carrying the Republicans to the annual retreat crashed and had to turn around because the Republican Congress failed to stop the funding of Planned Parenthood. And I told you at the time that was it. Now, I didn't realize at the time that this accident was God telling the Republicans that they were going to lose the House. That is what this crash was about. And if you remember correctly, the number on the engine is 145. That represents Isaiah 45, which is about Donald Trump. And the Republicans paid the price for not listening to my prophecy at that time. That the reason the train crashed and it had to turn around was because they had continued to fund Planned Parenthood. And of course, Ruth Bader Ginsburg favors the funding of Planned Parenthood. I believe she was originally a board member for the ACLU, a very anti-Christian organization. Now, you cannot listen to the false prophets on YouTube. People like Charlie Shamp and Mark Taylor, they tried to tell you there would be a red tsunami. They even claimed that the Lord told them there would be a red tsunami. There was no red tsunami. The Democrats took control of the House of Representatives, and God is telling us that this is a huge error on the part of America. And he is warning us with the three cracked ribs of Ruth Bader Ginsburg about the prophecy in Daniel 7, about the three ribs in the bear's mouth. Now, there was a true prophet before the election, Bill Still. Did you read about his vision where he saw the angels over the polling booths contending with each other? And he saw 1 million Americans who had given up their lives for freedom in this country. And they were all angry. And they were angry because they knew that America was going to deny our freedoms and to deny those people who had given up their lives to preserve our freedoms. Too many Americans want slavery, and that's what we are going to get. And worse, we are going to get the effects of World War III. And as I told my people on the rosary this morning, I pray the rosary every day, by the way, live, you should join us. I told them about the prophecy of Jacinta, the third of the little seers at Fatima. She received a prophecy which said, there is a secret of heaven and a secret of earth, and the latter is terrifying. The secret of heaven is Armageddon. The reason that is not terrifying is because God will take only the evil people from the earth, people who support the Antichrist, people who support the one world government, the deep state, in other words. In other words, most of these Democrats who were elected to Congress, who are opposing the freedoms that Donald Trump wants to ensure that we continue to have in this country. He wants to make America great again. And these people want to bring in socialism. And that is represented by the bear. And the bear is going to destroy the three ribs, as Daniel said. And I don't think you could get much more clear than this prophecy of Ruth Bader Ginsburg suffering three fractured ribs. It was a clear reference to Daniel 7. It came right after the election. That is God's response to the election. And he is warning not only Ruth Bader Ginsburg, he's warning the rest of us that America faces destruction by Russia. Russia will perceive that Donald Trump is weakened, and he is weakened. Americans must support him. Please don't listen to people like Rachel Maddow and Don Lemon, people who hate America, who want communism. They think that they will be in leadership. No, you people are going to suffer the effects of World War III, along with everyone else. The secret of Earth that Jacinta warned about is destruction by mankind. And the problem with that is that the good will die along with the bad. Well, that is my message for today. I'm sorry it's not an uplifting message. It is the message that God is sending us, just as he gave us the message from that train crash, the Isaiah 45 train, and that was clear as it could be. And I told you at the time that it was a warning to the Republicans. And I'm telling you now, this accident to Ruth Bader Ginsburg is a warning to America. Please listen to me. The time is getting very, very short.